Force Gaming, he's done reviews, he's done a lot of critiques, and he's talked a lot about games in general. But now he's talking about what the problem with modern game reviews are. And don't get me wrong, I think there are plenty. I wonder if my list is the same as his.
Every time a big new release rolls around, I am once again reminded game reviews have some major problems. Problem number one, most reviews are rushed. In a majority of cases, review codes are sent less than a week prior to release. On many occasions, in fact, I've received codes with only like 2 or 3 days left before embargo. 2 to 3 days to play through a game, write, record, and edit a review. Yeah, it's less than ideal, to say the least.
But are they really playing through the game? I think a lot of game reviewers spend a little bit of time dabbling with, get a broad sense of the mechanics, and then just go from there. I don't think that a lot of like the major game reviewers go through the story to the point where they understand when the big dynamic switch happens or how there may be a slow burn in character development that takes a while to get to. I think most of them are just getting the basis of the game and then going from there.
Maybe even with a full week, you basically have to speed run through a game if you are looking to have anywhere near an all-encompassing review. I mean, ideally, I personally want at least like 30 to 50 hours before I feel confident enough that I can talk about all of the important aspects and elements to a game. Let's say I get a review code.
Point. Like maybe the standard should be that attached to the game review at the time of release, or at the time of creating the review, they should attach how many hours they have into the game so that you have a true understanding of how much they developed the game in their playthrough to understand all of the mechanics and how in-depth the story is and everything like that. It's just a thought.
And it's a full week, 7 days prior to the embargo lifting. In this kind of a scenario, my schedule would look something along these lines. I'd spend 4 to 5 days playing through the game. So let's say I sit down and play for 12 hours a day. That would be at max 48 to 60 hours. And when we're talking about doing a review for an open world game or an RPG or a live service game, like, forget about it, dude. That's barely enough time to run through the main story with some side stuff, and it is definitely not enough time to do and see everything in the game. Okay, so days 1 through 5, that's me playing 12 hours a day from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., 60 hours in total, and then you just better hope that that is enough time to make a really informed, in-depth review. Come day 6, it's time for me to sit down and actually process my experience, like think about the game, rehash all of the systems and mechanics, and then write down all of my thoughts in a single day, and then sit in front of the camera and record what I wrote out about it. And then day 7 happens and it's time to edit the review. Now this is typically gonna take between 8 to 10 hours minimum. I mean, especially if we're talking about like working with 40 plus hours of gameplay footage, going through all of that, searching for examples of.
That is a pretty long timeline, but that's also a timeline that allows I would say above average level of due diligence towards the game, the space, and the product he's trying to put out. That seems like a very fair timeline. It is rushed given his standards for what he's trying to achieve. So, I mean, that is a fair timeline, but it still leaves a lot of room for error in the game review itself. Like in the case of Diablo 4, which the base game was very good. It took 2 to 3 weeks for most players to reach and feel the void of mid to late game content that made the game feel repetitive and without reward. So in a short 1 week review cycle like that, most or really no one would have seen that mid to late game flush that would have caused problems later on for that franchise.
Everything you were talking about, 12 plus hour edits are not that uncommon for that very reason. It's just a lot of stuff to parse through. Now, my point here isn't to complain about this process. No, it's simply to showcase that yes, even with having an entire week with the game before it releases, even that much time can result in a review that is pretty rushed out just due to the sheer amount of time
I think there are older games and there are still games that come out that are like this that have very, very short cycles. Talking about 20 to 30 hours of gameplay, single player experience, deeply immersive, but they're very short as far as time to completion. And those games can still easily be fully reviewed under this system, but a lot of modern games want 2 to 5 year life cycles with online options and updated DLC and everything. So if a game is shooting for an hour amount of content that lends to these 2 to 5 year life cycles of the game, you are never going to be able to fully review a game like that within a 1 week time, a 2-day time, like a 1 month time, because they're going to add hundreds of hours of side quests and details and other things in the game besides the main storyline that you won't get to branch out and explore truly in a short cycle for getting your review out when the game comes out, because that's when it's most important. The new Assassin's Creed is 14 hours. MK1 is pretty short too. MK1 is a little bit different, I think, in the way that it's a fighting game. So a lot of that game is going to be built and reviewed around the mechanics of the fights and the graphics and how everything comes together, as opposed to like a storyline or what the end game is like and things like on that side. So MK1 is kind of different when you're talking about the review space, but the new Assassin's Creed only being 14 hours, that is an example. Modern games are coming out, and it feels like there are several companies that are looking at shrinking back down the game size, trying to fill the world as much as they can to make it way more immersive and in depth with a shorter player experience. And those games can easily be reviewed on that 1 week timeline. It just depends on where the game's going and how long they want it to be around and continue to exist, right?
Time you really need. A full week in many cases barely cuts it, but again, having a full week, that's pretty rare in my experience. I would say in most cases, by the time you get a review code, you're looking at 4 to 5 days, somewhere in that ballpark.
Just making
but sometimes, like
even
I mentioned,
harder,
I've had
really.
even less. I've had like 2 or 3 days with the code before the.
There's nothing to say that you can't release a review 2 days to 1 week after the game comes out. Now, I know you're going to miss out on the most amount of traffic, because when a game launches is when people are going to most likely want to find reviews. But for your core audience, they would probably appreciate a more in-depth review that came a little bit later. And most people wait a couple of days after a game comes out to start seeing reviews and everything like that anyway. So if you want to be diligent, you can wait a day or two after launch. It's not ideal for the metrics, search algorithms, all of that. And that's a problem. But I don't foresee the game developers changing the way they give out codes and when they give out codes.
Embargo lifts. So for all of these reasons, most launch day reviews could more accurately be described as first impressions, because the pre-release review process simply does not allow enough time for reviewers to fully think through and digest a game. There is no opportunity. You're playing the game nonstop, then having to immediately form an opinion. You don't really get the time to steep in and really thoroughly think through the game. And even for people not attempting to hit embargo, a lot of times there is the pressure to get out the content while it is still relevant. Even people who get the game on launch day, they will be rushing through their play experience and then rushing to finalize their thoughts just to post it when it's still relevant. But that's only the first problem. Problem number 2 is that
Then in the review, they're going to say how they didn't experience all this stuff and the game felt very hollow and there was nothing to like excite them or challenge them, because their goal is to rush through to make a product instead of actually playing the game. And I think maybe this guy highlights something. They are first impressions. And maybe we released first impressions with the release of the game, but we give a more in-depth review a week or two later when you've had time to experience more, digest more, whatever, even a month later. And that would be a more honest system for reviewing than what we're doing now. Because when they rush through the game to get that, get as much as they can as far as storyline, whatever, they are skipping a bunch of things. And then they in turn complain about everything they skipped to power through a video game. Maybe it should be a first impressions. They should take their time. They should actually explore in depth what they're looking to explore and how they would organically play the game. Release a first impression at launch of the game. Come back for review later after you've had time to actually develop the game the way it is actually experienced and developed. And then, by the way, content creators, if you do it that way, you get 2 videos out of a game review instead of 1. Just a thought.
Reviews are done in a bubble. Most
The second one
reviewers,
probably wouldn't
first
do
of
as
all,
well,
will
though.
only play through the game on a single system, whether that's a particular console or whatever PC they happen to have. And there's
that's
never enough
fair.
time, as we just mentioned, to do multiple full playthroughs. Like, forget about it. That is never happening. What that ends up meaning is that you only ever see and you only ever experience the game as it runs on the particular system that you're playing on. This impacts your exposure to both bugs as well as technical issues. You may or may not experience
This is
them.
true.
Once a game releases and there are thousands, if not millions of people playing on a wide array of different hardware configurations and different consoles, it is only
I got a
then
point on
that
this.
we get a good sense of how good or not the game is on a technical level.
With this one, I think this is a huge problem that I saw in a lot of games, and it's not even necessarily like platform to platform specific, because certain people have different experiences on every single game out there. I have a guy in chat to this day that says Cyberpunk was amazing on launch and didn't have a single issue on launch in Cyberpunk. Puts them in a far minority for the people that they experienced that game. If he did a review based on his experience, it would be a lot different than a majority of players playing on different platforms, most of which had problems. Same with Outriders. I played Outriders on my Xbox. I loved the game. I didn't have any issues, and I thought it was a really good experience. But when I went back to it and I started hearing people talk about it, they're like, Outriders was absolutely packed with bugs. Matchmaking was broken. It did not work. I was like, that is so mind-blowing to me because I didn't have those experiences. That's another problem, but I don't think reviewers, even if they had the time to do it, would play on multiple platforms because, one, a lot of them probably want to get a review done so that they can move on to the next review. But 2, that is a big thing to ask for them to get a code for the PC and the Xbox and the PlayStation, play against 3, and then the experience starts to drain because now you're oversaturating yourself with this content. And that may detract from the enjoyment of the game, but it would give you a better understanding of the technical level of how the game performs.
But when you're putting together a review, you don't have access to that collective knowledge. There aren't thousands of Reddit threads or Twitter posts showcasing the slew of bugs, glitches, or performance issues that a game might have. So I could sit down with a game and play through it for 2 weeks straight, and maybe I only see like a handful of minor hiccups, and as a result, my impression would be, hey, that wasn't all that bad. Like, the game ran pretty well for me, there were only a few bugs, and those bugs weren't bad enough to ruin my experience. So I would say, from my playtime with it, my hands-on in the bubble that I am in, technically the game seems to be in a good place. And then the game releases and it's like, oh my god, look at all of this broken crap. This game is a total complete mess. You just can't know what you don't know. And when you're doing pre-release
Absolutely.
reviews, you don't know what the experience is like for other people. It's also the case that you will miss out on any launch day issues. We're talking things like queue times with overloaded servers, or overloaded servers resulting in poor performance for the people who are playing. Things like rubber banding or having interactions take
Like, every game that launches now just becomes a queue sim for the first couple days or at a minimum the first couple hours. And like things like Payday 3, where a bunch of creators went to an event, played the game, enjoyed the game, loved playing the game, said great things about the game, for the game to launch and no one to be able to play it because it's always online and it's server-based matchmaking, even if you're playing by yourself, destroyed the game experience. And everyone's saying, why would these creators tell us it's a good game when it's absolute garbage and no one can play it? They had no idea that that would happen. They had no warning, or they couldn't have known that that's what was going to happen with the server issues and the way the game operates its menus and matchmaking, even if you're by yourself or playing in a lobby with someone that you know. These things happen. Creators get backlash for it, but like he said, there's no way they could have foreseen it. It's a big problem, and that's maybe why it's better to launch a review 2 days, 3 days after launch than on launch day, because it gives you a better understanding of what's going to happen with the servers and how people experience that game.
30 plus seconds before they register, or like servers just straight up catching fire, and so no one can play for multiple days on end. These could be major problems that you just won't catch. So due to the very nature of reviews being done prior to most people having access to the game, and you only having your personal experience to go after, you don't have any of the collective community knowledge that can show you if there are widespread issues or performance issues or tons of bugs that you just don't happen to see. These reviews are done in a bubble, and so they end up missing out on a lot for that reason. But then there's problem number 3, and that is that publishers, they control the entire review process. Around the time of Starfield's release,
it's
for example,
their product. Why would they
seemed
not?
to be a particular issue. I saw a lot of fuss about the fact that certain reviewers and certain review outlets hadn't gotten keys, and people were acting like this was unusual. I'll let you in on.
I feel like that's pretty standard, but I also believe I saw that most of the people complaining about not getting review copies for Starfield were in the UK, which at the time, Bethesda, Activision, were still in a massive battle with the British Commission. They weren't even sure if they were going to keep putting efforts into the British market because they were in a battle with the British government about a merger that was pending. So that could have, and that probably had a lot to do why a lot of British review people did not get copies of Starfield, because of all the legal battles that they were still going through.
On a little secret, every single game release, publishers handpick who gets access to codes. And every single release, there are a lot of people who don't get access because, I mean, of course there is. There's not like some automated system where you check a box that says, yes, I review video games, and then you are instantly forwarded review codes for every single game that your heart desires. More. No, that's not how it works. Game
Terrible
publishers,
review.
many times working with third-party agencies, will.
I'm not great at reviews because I think everything that's an average experience gets an average review, 5 to 6. Slightly better, 6 to 7. I almost never give 10s, and I almost never give like 3s and belows, because at the end of the day, I think there's some entertainment value. Like, my review scale is very skewed to being neutral. So like, if you want a very good baseline review that's right down the middle, I'll start doing reviews. Probably not going to give you like all the details you want, but I'll say my 2 cents. If it's just a check mark on the internet says send me games before they come out, I'll talk about them. But that's not the process. I know it's not.
Handpick who gets review codes. They have always handpicked who gets codes, and they
It'll
always will
stop.
because there's no other way. Unless they're just like handing out codes to whoever the hell signs up, there is
Anyone
some sort of a
everyone
vetting
gets one.
process that goes into who is given early access to these games prior to them releasing. Now, there are like key distribution platforms that help facilitate this stuff, sites like Keymailer and Rainmaker, Lurkit, and others. But even those aren't completely automated and guarantee that you will receive keys. They are still,
Right.
you just sign up for them. It's basically a place to register. And then the publishers, either personally or through those third parties, will pick the ones who get access to those keys. The unfortunate reality is, it's like not the right of every reviewer to get a code for every game prior to launch. Publishers are
Accurate.
under no obligation to give out codes to anyone, actually. There are benefits, right? Especially for a company who thinks people will enjoy their game. Positive reviews, after all, they are free marketing. But on the flip side, negative reviews are, not something that they are looking forward to getting, right? So, and while it would be best for consumers and in an ideal world, everyone who wants a review code would get one, that's just not how this works. Pre-release access to games by its very nature is 100% at the whims of the publisher. They choose.
With how easy today it is to like, I'm going to start a YouTube channel, I'm going to do video game reviews, and like, this is my place now. You start getting a following, and now all of a sudden you want games. So like, everyone could do it in theory, but at some point they have to weigh the whole, like, we're still trying to like advertise and sell this game, not just give it to literally everyone because everyone says they do game reviews.
Who gets to play their games early. And because of this, there's a huge side effect, and that is that of incentives. To get early access, the publishers have to approve you, basically. Now, assuming the best, most noble of intentions, they will do this so long as they think you're going to give them a fair review. But assuming the
Fair
worst of
being the
intentions,
keyword.
they'll only give you access if they think you'll give them a positive review, or at the very least that you will go easy on the game. Now, how individual reviewers navigate
shouldn't be the
this
goal.
issue of incentives,
Fair.
it can vary
Fair
wildly. At the very least, consciously or not, you can certainly imagine how this is going to potentially affect the review process and how someone judges a game and then what they express about that game. I'll say personally, I am in the position where running my own channel, I have the luxury of only reviewing games that I am already interested in. I don't
Very
have
nice.
to, nor do I spend time on genres or games that I think I'm not going to like. So as a baseline, I tend to go into reviewing most games, at least with the assumption that there's a good chance I will like it. I'm not wasting my time on things that
All
I
right.
have no interest in. I don't have to. But it's also for that reason that if there's a game that I'm looking forward to and I get time with it and there are things I really don't like about it, I am more than happy to lean into those issues because it can be a huge disappointment. But yeah, I'm reviewing games that I'm generally expecting to like. If I don't like them, I will certainly talk about it. I do sometimes get the criticism that a lot of my coverage tends to be positive, but that's just because
And I think like that is why a lot of people now prefer like YouTubers channels like this, where you're going to be within a certain niche. You're going to find a creator that does reviews of games that you typically like, and you're going to go from that point. I think a lot of people are starting to shift to this style of game review over ING and the other big titles and they used to be magazines, but people who do absolutely everything and they get assigned a game and they may not even like it. They may hate that like genre of game and it will show in the review, and that's a real problem.
hobby and how I run my channel, I'm just talking about things that I enjoy. And if there are things that I enjoy or think I would enjoy and they let me down, dude, I'll blast it. You can run through my videos. There's plenty of room for criticism, and I'm more than happy to give it. So the less desirable aspect of this entire process of having to interact with publishers and request keys is, why do you or do you not end up getting picked? Was it because they don't think you'll give a fair review? Was it because they don't think you'll give a positive review? Was it because you made content in the past criticizing the company or some of their prior games? Was it because they once sent you an email and you never responded to it and that really bothered them, so they blacklisted you? Sounds ridiculous, but this can absolutely happen. Remember, the people handing out keys, they are people, flaws and all, just like the rest of us. People can be petty, and it can definitely happen. And the bottom line is many times you will just never know. It could be any one of those things or none of them at all. Maybe they just decided they were very limited. They were only going to send out 30 review codes in total, and you simply didn't make the cut. I'll tell you, it's happened to me plenty of times. There have been tons of games, even just in the past 6 months, that I've been wanting to cover, wanting to review. I'd reached out numerous times, just never heard anything. It absolutely happens. And it could be any of those reasons. It could be none of them, like I said. Those are three of the probably biggest issues that I see with video game reviews. The great news is they all have one simple solution, and that is post-launch reviews. Post-launch reviews have no time constraints. They're not trying to meet an embargo, so they're not having to speed rush through a game to get it out at the same time as everyone else. The only time constraint here could just be...
The other thing that I would love to see is a standardization of the rating scale, because God damn it, it is so hard to figure out like how a 1 to 100, a 1 to 10, a 2 thumbs up, a 5 stars, 3 popcorns, like one standard 0 to 10 scale. That is it. Let's stick with it. Done and done. That needs to become universal as well. In fact, I think the entire reviewing process should be more standardized to a certain degree. I understand that personal experience in the game does matter when you're doing these reviews, but that should only account for a certain percentage of the overall score. Technical performance, hours of gameplay, mechanic functionality, like a lot of these more objective versus subjective things should be taken into account and balanced. Gaming reviews, I think, need standardization because it's so hard to find someone you trust that is actually going to cut through all the BS and give you the answers that you want.
Like that of the reviewer themselves. If they're, trying to upload one video a week, then maybe that just falls in within some time restraints there. But there's no embargo pressure that and no tight, super enforced timeline that they're trying to complete a review within. They're also not having to do their review in a bubble. They have the time to gather the collective knowledge, to see how things play out at release, and to account for a lot of the widespread issues that other people beyond themselves might be having with the game. And to problem number 3, they don't deal with it at all, because there is no need for them to interact with the publisher and get approval to get access to the game. They're just playing it post-release like everyone else. They buy the game, they play it, and then they share their opinions. So the way I look at it is like this. We've got 2 different types of review. Well, there's more, but for argument's sake, we've got the pre-launch embargoed reviews, launch day reviews,
which is more of an
post-release reviews. Reviews that come out prior to release should be used more of like first impressions to get the general gist of the game and what that particular reviewer thought of their time with it. But these reviews will never be all-encompassing. They will always be at least a little rushed and are, without question, missing out on some pretty important details like how did the launch go and were there any widespread issues that I didn't personally experience. Whereas with post-launch reviews, they can take all of this into account, and for that reason, having more time to flesh it out and don't need to chase down publishers to try to get early access, this makes these post-launch reviews way more thorough and having way less conflict of interest, if none at all. Now, this isn't to say that the pre-launch reviews are useless, just that they have some inherent flaws, and I think it's important for you to keep those in mind anytime you watch or read any of those pre-release or on release day embargoed reviews.
Yes.
Personally,
To be clear, all of these reviews are just subjective suggestions, and they give you a general guideline of what one person experienced. If you're interested in the game, take the good, take the bad, whatever, take it in and make a decision, try it out. Like, the only way you're going to know if you enjoy a game is if you play the game. So you can take a lot of these things into account and you can decide, well, I'm interested, but I want to wait for them to fix the game. Maybe a couple patches down the road. Or I was kind of trying to feel it out, but now I'm not really interested or not. Or I wasn't interested before, and this didn't give me enough to get interested. But none of these reviews are actually going to tell you everything you need to know about the game because they do not experience the game the way you will experience it. And only you getting into the game will actually tell you how you enjoy the game. These are just little snippets that give you a peek to make you more or less excited about playing the game. Maybe I wait a little longer, maybe I don't play it at all.
I'm doing any pre-launch coverage for games myself. My goal is pretty simple. I want to inform people about the game. I want to discuss what I think about them with the time that I spent, while also fully acknowledging that until the game launches, we simply won't have the entire picture. But I just hope to, with my coverage and these type of reviews, give some people a useful starting point, basically. But those three problems aside, there is another major issue that both pre- and post-launch reviews deal with, and that is the rating system. That 10-point scale that you see when the game gets 7, 8, 9 out of 10, 10 out of 10.
Standardize it.
Actually, mostly useless, frankly, because the why 100%. And how different people pick a rating is all over the place. It is so individualized that combining all of these scores with tools like Meta and OpenCritic makes zero sense. But hey,
I didn't pre-watch this, but this exactly all of this 100%. I agree. It's garbage. It needs to be standardized to be something less subjective, more objective, but subjective things still need a place in that rating system, just not a majority of it.
I'm guilty of this myself. Many of us will still look at these aggregate review scores as some sort of reliable general impression of how good or bad a game is, and we really shouldn't. There was a time when the 10-point review scale was broken up into multiple categories with a weighted value based on importance. So for example, it could look something like this. Gameplay would be worth 3 points, graphics worth 2 points, visuals 2 points, story 2 points, and then performance worth 1 point. And then, depending after playing through a game, what a reviewer thought about it, they would give a different to the decimal point score for each one of these categories and then tally it up to see what the total score out of 10 was. Now, there's a reason we don't see outlets use this method anymore, because it's stupid. It is stupid, but it at least provided some sort of a baseline framework for how we go about picking a number, as opposed to the common method used today, which for most reviewers really seems to boil down to, like, how do I feel about
personal
the game?
Feels.
Okay.
And like that system of having the different categories actually gives you a way to gauge where that rater or reviewer, that is a terribly unfortunate pause screen, and I apologize for that, but it gives you, the reader, a way to gauge what emphasis they put on what parts of the game. And you can see, like, oh, they put a lot of emphasis on the graphics. I don't care about the graphics as much. So maybe this reviewer and me are out of sync, and maybe I don't take him to heart on a lot of those things. So like you can actually see on a scale where they rate the importance of certain items within a game, and you can use that to judge where you would put those things, and it gives you a better idea and understanding. I love the idea of having broken down categories to add up to the 1 to 10 so that you know how they arrived at that number. It gives you the thought process behind their review instead of just a number that's like, I feel like it's 6.5, solid 7. It's good. It's good, but like, you know, I'm not going to play it forever. Like, that doesn't tell me anything. Like, how did you get to that number? That is information that is super useful.
When I think about the game, what feeling arises? Does it feel like a 7 or does it feel like an 8? Like, that's how it comes across, honestly, when I see most people attribute numbers to games. It's like they're picking numbers out of thin air. Instead of having a framework that sort of makes sense, even if it is stupid to boil a game down to decimal point values per category. Like, hey, is the gameplay of Zelda, is it a 2.6 out of 3 or is it a 2.7 out of 3? Like, what are we even talking about? Even though that is very dumb, that at least gave some structure to the process of slapping a number on a game compared to how scattershot it appears to be done today. And then there's the fact that most reviewers only use half of the scale, right? Like rarely, if ever, is a game given below a 5, although it can be argued, and I would agree that most games people find worth reviewing are somewhere between a 5 out of 10, because every game below 5, nobody cares about. Like when I see someone give a AAA game a 1 out of 10, I'm like, how many games have you played? I don't care how buggy, unfinished, or unoptimized a game is, there ain't a single AAA title released in the past 20 years that is as bad as a 1. Have you spent any time on Steam at all? Have you seen the sheer volume of utter garbage that's released every single day? There are so many horrendous games coming out all the time. Those are the 1 out of 10s, not Anthem because it didn't have enough endgame or the story wasn't as good as you might expect from BioWare. Sure,
Still
you can not
good.
like it, but it's definitely not a 1 out of 10 game. 1 out of 10 games are released 30 a day on Steam. Like, that is the garbage that deserves
and half
a
of
1
those
out
are
of 10.
scams.
But then this raises the other question, which is, what do these scales account for? Like, what are they scaling against? Are we giving games a rating based on how they compare to all other games in existence? Are we rating them to how they compare to the handful of games we play each year over the past 5 years, over the past 10 years? Are we giving it a rating depending on the one game that we've played for the past 5 years? And the answer is all of the above. Every reviewer, when giving some point value to a game, is using their own personalized scale of comparison, which further makes aggregating these scores completely pointless. And I'm not talking about the fact that like individuals are judging a game based on their own personal taste and preferences. Of course that's happening. That is all reviews are. They are an individual's subjective
you have to account
opinion
for that.
on a game. Did they like it? Did they not?
There are some things you have to account for that in the review because the storyline is captivating to you as an individual, very subjective. A enjoyment or fulfillment out of getting rewards, very subjective. One person is going to feel more fulfilled for getting a reward for a quest than another. There are things in gameplay that are going to be subjective, but there are other things that don't weigh as much as like the graphical appearance. Are the mechanics smooth? Like, that's just, and like everything does have a personal spin on it. Obviously it's impossible to be purely objective on reviews, but it's a matter of like kind of leaning towards the more consistent objective things than all subjective feelings.
Not why. But on top of that, what I'm talking about is like the database of titles that they're pulling from when they put a rating onto a game is different for every single person. So you got someone who might say they might play a game and they're like, okay, this thing is all right, but it's not nearly as good as Path of Exile, so I'm going to give this game a 4 out of 10. But mind you, Path of Exile is practically the only game they played for 10 years straight. So that is like what they're comparing it against. The TLDR of this is basically to say that the 10-point review scale sucks, in particular aggregating scores from different reviewers and then judging a game based on that number. It's totally unreliable. Not only are everyone's tastes different, of course, but also everyone's scale is different, how they are rating it, the reasons why they are rating it, their reference points at which they're scaling it against, how they even use the scale. There's just such huge variance across the board. Review scales, I would say, are only helpful in isolation per reviewer. So if you follow one particular reviewer for a long time, you will get a sense of how and why they give games the ratings they do. But mashing all of these different 10-point ratings,
and I think that's where a lot of people are now, is they have like one or two guys that they go to, or gals, one or two people that they go to for reviews, and they know that reviewer based on the games they played, the games that reviewers reviewed, and how similar in ratings they are to what they would think.
From completely different people who are using these scales completely differently with completely different reference points, mashing all that stuff together, it feels completely worthless. But not only that, it's especially bad with how it directly affects studios and developers. We got aggregate scores impacting developers' yearly bonuses. Like, hey, if Metacritic isn't above an 8.5 on this game, no Christmas money this year. Or worse yet, this can directly result in layoffs and even entire studios just being shut down. This industry can be pretty brutal, with people spending 5+ years on a project, having it release, and then having half of the staff fired because it scored below an 80 on Metacritic. I know job security is practically a fable for most industries, but it does seem especially rough for game developers. The 10-point review score system, it is awful. I think we should throw it away. I actually find the simple binary I recommend or I don't recommend this game with a short list of reasons why. I find that to be the most helpful, as has been said many times by others.
Straight and to the point, I guess.
Topic. Your best bet when it comes to trying to figure out like if a game's going to be for you, if you're going to like a game or not, is to just find individual reviewers whose coverage you enjoy and whose tastes tend to align up with your own. And then hopefully their coverage gives you enough of a good overview of the game, its pros and its cons, in order for you to make your own informed decision. Even better, find a few of them, watch stuff, raw footage on Twitch, and then use that conglomerate of information to make informed purchase decisions. So with all of that covered, with all of the issues with game reviews and some of the potential solutions, why do reviews? What's the point of reviews? Well, there's definitely something very helpful there. Like why I personally make reviews is I want to just create stuff that is useful and helpful to people. I really do try to focus on providing a detailed overview of what a game is, what are its systems, its mechanics, the content, what's the gameplay loop like, with the hope that I can paint a pretty clear picture of, hey, this is the game, and then add my general impressions, what I liked and what I didn't. And hopefully this lets people decide if that game, with all of that stuff in mind, is going to be something that they might enjoy.
It still has a place in the market to help push someone towards one side or the other if they're on the fence about whether they want to try a game. Reviews still help that sliver of the market that says I'm looking at it, but I don't know yet. So it still has a valid point and like purpose in life, and you know, trying to be fair and balanced about it is the only way to go about it, really.
Especially when it comes to any of my pre-release coverage, my goal is to just make something that's informative and hopefully can provide a little bit of some early helpful guidance for people. Also, I review because I enjoy it, kind of. It's actually sort of a love-hate relationship, especially when it comes to trying to hit embargoes.
I feel like that's all content creation.
Experience can definitely suck some of the fun out of it. There's no question about it. And I don't always love that I don't really have enough time to ruminate and really think over my play experience. Maybe it's just a cognitive flaw with me personally, but I feel like I need a couple of weeks to really play through and really think about a game before I can be super coherent with my thoughts on it. Again,
that's very fair.
A personal issue. Wouldn't be too surprised. So I'll wrap up by saying this. Pre-release reviews cannot and will not ever paint the entire picture, but they definitely have a use. They act as a starting point from the perspective of the individual reviewer. They are often at least a little rushed. They are made in a bubble and can miss widespread issues that they didn't personally experience, and they do have to go through that process of getting approval from publishers to gain access. Unless there are major changes to this process, you should expect pre-release reviews to always have these issues. While I still enjoy making this content myself, I am well aware of its problems because I've been doing it for long enough. I hope to start doing more post-launch reviews in the future because I would like to have more cohesive, fully thought out looks at games, but I do still enjoy doing pre-release reviews. But boy, they have a lot of issues, and hopefully I've done a good job of explaining some of them to you here today. That is going to do it for this video. Thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed.
Go ahead, like, subscribe, follow. Oh, subscribe. He's on YouTube. There's the link. Good video. I think he has a lot of really good points, and I agree with a lot of what he said. I think that people just don't do the due diligence to complete a game review in the current way it's set up. People are obsessed with being first or getting it out there as fast as possible, and they destroy their own gameplay to do it, which in turn lessens the review, even though if they took their time, they may have enjoyed it a little bit more. I think there's a lot of factors that go into it, but I think I like his solutions, and I agree with a lot of what he said there. I obviously more well-informed than I am because he does game reviews and he's done them for a while and he's pretty good at it. I just absorb them and I make my own judgments on all these creators as I take in their content and decide whether I agree with their statements or how they give their reviews. I think if they followed this guy's kind of plan and what Force Game was saying a review should be, it'd be a lot better space for reviewing, giving gamers a much better understanding of what's going on, and everyone wins in the end. And subscribe, do this stuff. You want all that? All of that. Hey there, it's Skeg Broggy. Thanks for watching the video. And if you enjoyed it, please let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button and follow me here on Twitch for more awesome content. Link is in the description.